I was driving home after a blind date the other day and was stuck in a major traffic jam for half an hour. There was a huge pileup up ahead, and so the highway looked more like a parking lot than anything else. I shut off the engine and began nodding off. I didn't sleep much the previous night and was yawning throughout the entire date as well. My date probably thought that I was really bored, and I must have left a bad first impression. I woke up to a loud explosion, and as soon as I opened my eyes, I was blinded by fires and more explosions around me. I covered my face instinctively because of the windshield shattering, and the next second, I felt the driver's side window get blown up as well. My left hand was bleeding due to a shrapnel that flew in from the explosion. I didn't even feel it initially due to the shock and the adrenaline kicking in. I was gonna jump out of the car and make a run for it toward the side of the road, but then there was another huge explosion going off, and it literally pulverized the 18-wheeler a few cars ahead. Fragments from the explosion shot out in every direction, and one of them hit my forehead. I could feel a warm liquid flowing down my nose and cheeks. I honestly thought I was going to die, but I got lucky and it was only a deep cut. That was the wake-up call. I realized that moment I had to get off the highway somehow. I said fudge it and jumped out of the car. I must have looked like a crazy person because the road was fine. There were no explosions, all of the other cars were still stuck in traffic, and my car's windows were intact. I got back in the car and saw something impossible right away. I had a huge cut on my hand. Not only that, I also had a deep cut on my forehead and was bleeding heavily from both wounds. I used a napkin from last night's takeout order to stop the bleeding on my hand, but I had to use my jacket to slow down the bleeding from my forehead. It was pretty bad. I didn't know what was happening to me. I only dreamt of being in what I could describe as a war zone, and I wasn't actually there. It was a dream. How in the world did the wounds in my dreams transfer to reality? I was confused, scared, and shocked. Other than somehow my dreams having an effect on my reality, I had no other ways to explain what was happening to me. It took another half an hour for the traffic to move again, and I went to the hospital right away. While getting the stitches, the doctor asked me how I got the cuts. I couldn't answer him right away because I couldn't tell him the truth. After a short while, I awkwardly told him that I was playing with firecrackers. I don't think he bought it. The doctor suggested some minor plastic surgery procedure for my forehead. He said the scars would be really big and ugly. I nodded and took the number he gave me for the plastic surgeon, but I could care less about the future scars at the time. What I needed was to understand what had happened to me and nothing else. I still don't understand what happened to me on that day. Was I in a different dimension? A different reality perhaps? Believe me, I know how it sounds, but how else can you explain the scars? I don't know. I think it's futile to try to search for answers at this point. If it happens again in the future, I just hope I end up in a better place. Once is enough for any type of war zone. The time was 2 in the morning, and I had just left the club before I got too wasted to even go home. My friends stayed behind because 2 of them had their eyes set on some guys, and another girl just wanted to continue getting wasted. I don't do one-night stands, and I'm not so keen on waking up in some stranger's apartment naked. So I left the club and was standing on the sidewalk waiting for my ride. I was out there for maybe a minute or 2 when a group of girls approached me from behind and beat me to a pulp. They kicked me, stabbed me with their heels, and one girl was hell-bent on pulling all of my hair out. I could feel the assailants were getting tired after a few minutes, and that's when I felt a sharp stinging sensation in my left arm. I didn't know what it was at the time, and all I could do was to protect my face with my hands. Then another minute passed when someone yelled, "Hey!" and the girls dispersed like hyenas fleeing upon seeing a lion. It was the bouncer who had come out after whatever he was doing inside the club. It seemed like he was about to chase after the girls, but he stopped when he saw my condition. I think he felt I needed an ambulance far more than catching the perpetrators. I was bleeding from my cuts to my face, especially around the eyes. The bouncer must have thought I got stabbed or something, but luckily for me, most of the injuries were superficial. I guess it would have been a different story if the assailants were male, but no, it was mostly the heels that did the brunt of the damage on my face. The ambulance arrived, I was taken to the emergency room, received 112 stitches around my face and neck area, but that was the extent of the damage. After I was placed in a room at the hospital, a nurse came in and asked me if I had gotten an injection in recent days. I told her no. She checked out my left arm, then told me she'd be back with a doctor. While I was getting the stitches, the nurse had seen a spot on my left arm that looked like a fresh needle mark. She wasn't sure at first, but I guess she felt she had to be sure. That's why she asked me about getting the shot, and when I said no, she instantly knew there was something fishy about the situation. If you remember the way I described the beat-up, you might recall I said I felt a sharp stinging sensation in my left arm. So when the doctor came to see me, she checked my left arm and told me that I have a clear mark of a needle. They did a blood work, urine test, and ran some other tests on me, but didn't find any unusual substance in my system. For what particular reason, who knows? But the doctors concluded that the assailants must have used some type of pin or needle to attack me. That was the end of that. I was discharged the next day, and my parents took me to their home instead of my apartment so they could look after me. I knew my wounds would heal, and I didn't care so much for the scars I'd have on my face. I had survived the attack, and that was the most important thing. However, there was one problem that I couldn't solve with my resolve. I couldn't fall asleep. Try as I may, I couldn't sleep for more than 5 minutes at a time during my overnight stay at the hospital. It was the same deal the next day when my parents took me to their home. Normally, I'd pass out in the morning if I didn't get any sleep the previous night. But I was wide awake even at 3 in the afternoon. Don't get me wrong, I was sleepy and tired like I had just run a marathon, but it's just that I couldn't fall asleep. I knew I had a serious problem by the second day of not getting any sleep. I couldn't concentrate on anything, my body felt weak, and I wasn't even hungry anymore. My parents took me to see a doctor in the afternoon, and I was hospitalized on the same day. They ran some scans, did some tests, and asked me many questions relating to the assault. 2 days thereafter, they still couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. By this point, I stopped eating solid food and my body began to shut down. My blood pressure was worryingly high, even though I've never had issues with high blood pressure. I could still walk, but barely. Whenever I stood up to go to the bathroom, it felt more disorienting than after getting wasted overnight. Talking also became an issue as I began to stutter and also had difficulty remembering the things that had been spoken to me just minutes before. My mom would tell me something, then bring up the same subject after 5 minutes, but I wouldn't remember that we had that conversation. By nighttime, I had lost the sense of taste and smell. Mom fed me some soup, but I couldn't tell what type of soup it was. When the spoon was moved closer to my mouth, I couldn't smell it either. I could feel that the lack of sleep was slowly killing me. Then day 5 had arrived. I was having microsleeps every few minutes and I was barely responsive to people. Mom would come closer and caress my face, but I couldn't feel her hand on my face. Dad sat next to me and began to cry holding my hand, but I couldn't feel that either. I had lost the sense of touch. As I remember, we had a few earthquakes on that day. Of course, in reality, there was none. It just felt like it to me because of the mysterious tremors I felt every once in a while. I also hallucinated a whole lot. I saw people flying in the air and nurses were somehow walking through the walls as if they were made out of nothing. I could spend hours describing to you every kind of hallucinations I've had. I saw cats walking upright like humans. It rained in my room as if the ceiling wasn't there at all. When the nurse came to check up on me, I saw that she had 8 arms like a spider. But not all hallucinations were trippy like that. Some were truly disturbing. One of the visions that really stood out was this ugly creature that I had never seen before, not even in a film. It was skinny, tall, and overall had a humanoid figure. Its skin looked similar to an elephant's, so imagine coarse, dry, with lots of cracks on the surface. This creature would walk around the room and harass my parents. It was scary because they reacted to what it was doing. If it scratched my mom's neck, then mom reacted to that by quickly rubbing on the spot with her fingers. When the creature poked at my father's face with his sharp nail, he was startled by the pain and began rubbing on the spot as well. It just seemed so real. The creature did the same things to the nurses and the doctors that came to see me every few hours. They all reacted to it as if they could feel what this imaginary creature was doing. But the scariest moment was when the creature realized that I could see it. It stood at the foot of my bed and stared at me with pure hatred in his eyes. Then it came closer to me and I couldn't do anything to stop it. I couldn't move, talk, let alone move a finger. I was essentially paralyzed. The creature leaned over and looked me straight in the eyes. Then something came out of his mouth that was long and sharp. It was at least 10 inches long, and I imagine it was its tongue. Without a warning, the thing went right through my left eye socket, but I couldn't feel a thing. I passed out after that, and as it turned out, I had actually gone to sleep in reality. That was the end of the waking nightmares, and I could finally sleep normally again. The doctors could only guess that my temporary sleeping problems might have stemmed from the stress and fear. The truth, however, is that they had no clue. No one did. The 5 sleepless days were by far the scariest, harshest, and the most punishing experience of my life. I don't think anything that might happen in the future could top it. There's just no way. Everything that I saw and felt during the 5 days, I believe they were all in my head. People certainly weren't flying, and they weren't walking through solid walls either. As for the creature I saw, in a way you can say that it might have actually saved my life. Without it attacking me and putting me unconscious, I might have died from sleep deprivation. I think it could have been a creation in my head, something that I unconsciously knew would put me to sleep. The mind works in a mysterious way, you never know. I can't think of a single reason why I couldn't fall asleep for that long, but that happened. The needle mark on my arm, medically speaking, it had nothing to do with my sleep deprivation. How your brain can flip a switch and instantly turn you into an insomniac is beyond me. But as scary as it is, it does happen. I'm lucky to be alive today, and being able to sleep again is a blessing from God. I wanted to share my story because, as it so happens, cases like mine are literally 1 in a million. Today, I get paid handsomely to speak about my experience in conferences, colleges, and to medical scientists. Weirdly enough, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Sometimes, you really can make the best out of worse situations.